everyone, my name is Jem. I am a disabled freelance consultant, trainer, blogger, you name it, I'm doing it. And today I am very excited to be bringing you a video all about inclusion and specifically about navigating your campaigns and having inclusion in mind. I'm going to be talking about language, but also just generally inclusive moves that you can do to make sure that you're being as inclusive as possible. Now, I'm going to be saying the word inclusive a lot, as you can tell, so feel free to count how many times I do. Now, I work in equality, but my specialism is disability. So, although I'm going to be talking about inclusion in general, at the end I'm going to be specifically looking at disability. So if that's something you're interested in, carry on watching. So first of all, what do I mean when I say inclusive? Well, to me, inclusive just means thinking about more than one person. Just means literally not excluding people. Whether that's through language, whether it's through behaviour, attitudes, and that's basically what this video is going to be, is looking at what we can do to just welcome even more people than you may be doing already. So this section is going to be about when you're creating your campaigns, what do you need to do before, how can you plan it? And the first thing I wanted to mention was the idea of intersectionality. So when we're thinking about campaigns, sometimes we can think about the audience too much, and we can think one certain group is going to be looking at your campaign, when ultimately I think we should be thinking about everybody and thinking about diversity, thinking about different people, so that when we are doing campaigns, we're not just thinking about one person. For example, you may be doing a campaign that's ultimately around students who are parents. However, we still need to acknowledge that there'll be students that are parents who are mature, who are in the LGBT plus community, who are disabled. So even if you are aiming at a certain audience member, you've still got to consider intersectionality within that. So just bear that in mind when you are thinking about campaigns. It's not just going to be one group who are all the same. And that sounds really basic, but I think that's something important to think about. The second point is about interpretation of messages. So I've worked in a student union before. I was a SAB officer for 2 years. And I know that you have to work with marketing, you've got your own ideas, and it's about collaborating. Something to think about is how all groups are going to acknowledge the campaign, interpret it. Is it going to affect somebody a certain way? And I've got an example of this, which is, I'm sure they won't mind me saying, a lot of student unions have leadership races, and leadership races can be very quick-paced, survival of the fittest, and sometimes that's not good for everybody. Now, when I was an officer, it was suggested to me that we did a campaign that was something along the lines of stand, run, and race. And as somebody who's a wheelchair user, that obviously to me didn't strike as very inclusive, as somebody who doesn't stand, can't run, and races in a different way. So coming up with campaigns like this and getting really excited about an idea, it's really important just to talk with colleagues who are diverse with different protected characteristics to make sure that the wording and the messages and the meaning really makes it inclusive to everybody and doesn't accidentally push somebody out, which obviously is not the intention. However, as we know, intention isn't everything, and it can't excuse leaving people out in a campaign. I always say, if you were to barge into somebody, it still hurts, even if you didn't mean it or not. And I think that's the same with any kind of campaign or wording. It's about really understanding what that could mean for everybody, not just the audience member that you're thinking of in particular. And that leads me on to my last point in creating a campaign, and that's wording. Now, I really do believe that wording is very powerful, and choosing your words, well, it's that phrase, choose your words wisely. I definitely believe in this sentiment. Words are powerful, and it's really important to make sure that you are using the right and correct words, whether that's to do with keeping up with the right wordings, making sure you're not accidentally using the wrong wording, and listening to feedback as well. If you have written something that's not intentionally good, then it needs to be sorted out. And if somebody does come back to you with a bit of feedback or critique about certain wording, try not to get defensive. Try look into the background, ask other people, and even if it's not something that affects you in a particular way, bear that in mind and make sure you use it or don't use it in your next campaign. Let's move on to actually pushing a campaign. So when you're pushing a campaign, it's really important to remember access and accessibility. Now, I'm not the best person to talk about this, I'm not the expert, but accessibility online is absolutely key, although a lot of people don't think about access online. But I can give you a few basics today to start off with, and that's around social media. So first of all, making sure that you use alt text on images, and in Instagram you have to sort of go into your settings first and make sure that you can add the alt text on. In Twitter you can add alt text into any image that you post, and now GIFs as well, which is great. And make sure you practice if you do work in content creation. Make sure you practice highlighting alt text, practicing describing what's in an image, practice what it actually looks like, describe it. Don't go into too much detail, just say basic what it is. If I was to screenshot this frame and describe, I would say a blonde woman sitting in a wheelchair talking to the camera. It's simple. Another key accessibility tool you can do online is making sure you capitalise each letter in a hashtag. So let's say hashtag access matters, you would capitalise the A and the M. This means that it's a lot more readable for people, reading a hashtag for anybody, but also if you're using a screen reader, it will make sure it can read each word in the hashtag. So it's quite cool, really. Another accessibility feature to include is definitely subtitles and captions. This is in videos especially for people who are hard of hearing. It just means that you can read what's said in the video, and for the sake of another half an hour to type that up, it just means more people can get involved and then not being excluded in reading and watching your video. And we all benefit from captions and subtitles. I mean, if you've been in bed on a night and you don't want to put the volume on, we've all read the subtitles. So the more people that can watch it, the better. So there are a lot more things you can do on social media to make it accessible, but those are just a few things. I would really recommend looking online. I'll see if I can put a few descriptions of people that talk about this a lot. Just educate yourself so that even more people can get involved into your campaigns. Speaking of getting involved in campaigns, another thing you can do that is really simple is ask for access adjustments. Not a lot of people do this, but if you imagine if you're going to go to an event, post-COVID of course, people will ask for your dietary requirements, and I think that should be extended along with access requirements as well. So just a simple line in any information or email that says, please let us know if you require any access adjustments. This means that you can just make sure that somebody feels welcome straight away, and you can make those changes if possible. So for example, when I was a fresher at uni, it was really hard to feel like I could go to an event because I was thinking about what if it's not accessible, what if I can't get in, and there's just those little things that if you do see accessibility being pushed online, then you kind of feel like, oh, well, at least they know, a little bit about access. So yeah, that's just very welcoming, and for everybody as well. That means that, if you have an invisible disability, it means that you can still ask for access adjustments because you've asked everybody. So similarly, talking about access, I wanted to bring up another point, which was, are you accidentally excluding anybody? So this could be in terms of a language. I was trying to think an example, and I can think of a couple. If you're doing a campaign and you set it around gender, so you might do a tweet that says, this one's for the girls, if it's subject that you think is around women, when actually you may potentially be excluding people that you don't need to exclude. An example could be around menstruation, sanitary towels, and actually we know now that this is not a girls' issue, it's a human issue, and it affects trans people, non-binary people, and we need to make sure that we don't necessarily exclude people in these conversations. So try and neutralise your wording where possible. Yeah, so try and neutralise your wording as much as possible, and don't use gender where it's not needed. In fact, I would say an inclusive world will be that we don't have to use gender, but that's just my opinion. And so for this next section, I'm just going to focus on disability as a whole. The first tip I would give around disability is don't be afraid to say disabled. The amount of times that I get people who say differently abled, they capitalise the A to show how not disabled I am, when actually I am a very proud disabled person. Not everybody is a proud disabled person, but I think disability is a globally known word, and yeah, the starting to that is to actually say what you mean, because it can get very confusing if you say different ways. Yeah, it's hard for people to resonate and to sort of get on board with any campaign. Moving from that as well, people definitely like to use the word special, and I would stay clear from special. Obviously, when you're in primary school, special education is used a lot, so I think it transfers from special education, and people use Senko, which obviously we still have to respect that community, especially parents. But I think as you get older, I mean, as an adult, do you really want to be called special? I don't think so. So that's just another reason why using disabled and disability is so important. Content warning, this next clip contains disability slurs. Another one is remember disability slurs. Disability slurs are used actually shockingly so much still, and I think people either know that they're slurs but still use them anyway, or they're not actually aware. So I think the most common slurs used would be like, wow, look at this crazy deal, or you'd be dumb not to take part in this, when actually there are so many disability slurs that do impact disabled people. May feel like when they read this content, they might feel like they don't want to take part anymore. And certainly for me, if someone was to use something like cripple, or I don't know, just everyday, in quotes, words, it would definitely turn me off. So I think it's really important to make sure that you get trained on this. So make sure that you're not using wording that is going to offend disabled people. There are so many words out there that you could use that doesn't have to be a disability slur. So for example, I use the word ridiculous a lot because it fits in with any comment that I want to make that might be negative. For years I used the word lame, didn't even know that describes something that doesn't walk or someone that doesn't walk. So yeah, I think we're all learning, we're all on a journey, but if you do know that something is a slur, don't use it, especially in a big and large organisation, because ultimately if people see and read those words, they're going to repeat it. And I genuinely think that's why I'm so passionate about being as inclusive as possible. And moving on from slurs, one more question to ask around your campaign is it ableist? And what I mean by that is it actively not aiming at disabled people and pushing them out? An example of this is a lot of campaigns around, let's say, active travel, They might say walk or cycle, and actively push that if you don't walk or don't cycle somewhere, it's a bad thing. We're getting that a lot, especially as we move into a world that we're thinking about the environment more. So yeah, just think about your campaign, and can you make it more inclusive by saying ride, stroll, roll. I've recently worked on a campaign who did this, and actually it looked so natural and clever and really inclusive, and they were really happy with their campaign as well to make sure they're including as many people as possible. So think about your message. How can you make sure that you are not unintentionally pushing people out? So to wrap up this video, I just wanted to say that a really good way to make sure that your campaign is as inclusive as possible is making sure that your team are all on board and you've all got the same ideas and criteria of how to do a campaign. So whether that's creating a guideline, whether that's creating a step-by-step how-to, words not to use, word to use, making sure that it's not, usually you get one person that's a champion and they'll make sure, or they'll keep an eye out on a campaign, but ultimately it's up to everybody, and we need to make sure that everybody's in the know of the things that I've just talked about, so that it's not just relying on one person, or it's not relying on getting the campaign out and then people start coming in with feedback on your campaign. Being proactive rather than reactive, which is always better. And getting training on the things I've just spoken about as well, about language, about how to push messages in an inclusive way is so important. And just to promote myself at the end, I am available if that's what you need. Training on wording, training on how to create a physically inclusive environment for both students and staff. I can do that. They are my quick tips on trying to be as inclusive as possible in your campaign. It's not going to happen overnight, and it's definitely not something that you can quickly change. It's about changing culture. It's about changing genuine people to want to make changes to their content. So as many people can get involved, because why not? Okay, and that's it from me. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Gemma Turner. My website is gemmaturner.com if you want to read a little bit more of my work, or if you would like me to come in and do some training, very happy to do so. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.